I can assure you that was not a human voice. Okay, so great. So let's start off with the poll to find out who you are. John, please share the poll. So what best describes your current context? And it would be very useful for our conversation to know if one of these four best describes you. You may do a couple, but if you could just pick one which best describes you. I'm a manager who is starting to coach others. You're a manager who's an experienced coach. You may be a coach already and does that as a profession, or none of the above. And if there's a better characteristic, feel free to put into the Zoom chat. But it would be good to know who is in this room. And we're also going to be covering 4 topics today to get the conversations going. The first topic is, what does coaching do for you? What are some of the benefits of coaching, and how does it serve you in this current climate? The second one is, if you're interested in creating a coaching culture in your organization or clients, how do you do it? Is coaching managers enough? And the third topic is, how do you be a coach and a manager at the same time? And why coaching now in this current climate of working during a pandemic and hybrid working? So tell us which topic we should start off with. And what I will try to do is facilitate a conversation to cover these 4 topics, which are based on a cool new book that Rashira, who is waving violently from Mumbai in the corner, is in my corner, has just written. So we're basing on Rashira's experiences of writing this new book, and also Oriana and myself are going to have a conversation around these 4 topics. But what would be really cool, and I think this is, I think I can do this, is there's 44% of people who are coaches in this audience. So somewhere during the conversation, I'm going to ask you what you think of these topics and get you involved in the conversation. I'm going to say, how does that sound? Let me do some introductions first. So firstly, Rashira, who is a friend of iOpener's for several years now, 2000, I think before the 2010s, and has been
a decade. Yeah, it's a decade in counting. Yeah.
I think when Rashira met me, I had jet black hair. There is no correlation to my grey hair and meeting Rashira. But Rashira's been working with iOpener, friend of iOpener, for over 10 years, partner at iOpener, dealt with mergers and acquisitions across EMEA and APAC, and then went into hiding and popped out with a brand new book, which has been endorsed by Sheryl Sandberg and Kathleen Hogan, people officer for Microsoft. And we're going to be, and that's the formal stuff. The informal stuff is, I've worked with Rashira in various continents, and she introduced me to congee, which is a beautiful Chinese breakfast. That's your introduction. And Oriana Tikel, who's the director of coaching and happiness at work at iOpener, and based on positive psychology. I've been working at iOpener since.
On and off for an awful long time, but more full-time since a year and a half ago.
And also I've worked with, I think, 7 countries, Oriana, and 4 airport lounges we have worked with. And I'm the director for Managed iOpener, and I'll be talking later about coaching at iOpener. But let's delve into these topics and see where we start off with first. So is it just enough? It seems like topic 2 is a favorite amongst the crowd. So let's get the conversation going around, is it enough just to do coaching training to create a coaching culture? What else is needed? Let's kick off with Rashira. What do you think?
Sure.
Do you want me to ask you a question about that?
Yes, please.
I've got a few up my sleeve. So in my coaching career, I have heard so many people say to me, I'm an intuitive coach. I just naturally, it comes into my leadership style.
Right.
And that's the way I lead. And how true do you think that is after doing all the research you've done?
So, Oriana, fabulous question, actually. And I think it sets the tone quite well. In the course of meeting over 50 corporate leaders, academics, I've met sports people. I met a lot of people from performing arts because I wanted this book to talk to everybody, right? When Penguin commissioned the book, they wanted this to be a guide for any aspiring manager. How do you become that leader that coaches and enables, right? The uncommon leader. So that's the title of the book, Coaching the Secret Code to Uncommon Leadership. But as I started to crystallize what coaching is and what coaching is all about, I realized it's, to me, a life skill. The whole premise of coaching is that you enable and elevate. When you do that, when you shine the light on others, you shine brighter. So as a concept, it's fantastic. But as you try to drill deeper and you try and articulate that, I have to be honest, I struggled. Because a lot of the managers I met, a lot of the leaders I met, they all truly believed that they were fantastic coaches. You look at some of the research, and the research also corroborates that. Managers tend to overestimate their own abilities to coach. Sure enough, some of them are gifted naturally, what we call a very high EQ or emotional quotient, the ability to manage yourself and your social relationships. So that's what simply put EQ is. And all of that is great. Some of us do it better than others. But if you dig deeper, there's an HBR study where they surveyed 3,761 managers, and they asked them to rank themselves on how they felt they were as coaches. Needless to say, everybody thought they were fantastic. And they did the same survey with their teams. So assess your boss on his or her coaching abilities. And I guess the answer is clear. Many of these managers, or rather 3/4 of these managers, overestimated their abilities to coach. And I think the answer lies not in the fact that there's malintent or there isn't enough understanding that coaching is a critical skill. It's their idea of what coaching is. We've gone through school and college and business school, and it's always been taught that a good manager should always have all the answers. A good manager should tell people what to do. So when a lot of these managers are coaching, supposedly, ostensibly, they're telling people what to do. Unknowingly or knowingly, they are trying to steer these individuals towards a mirror image of themselves. This is what made me successful in the past, and this is how you do it. So the problem lies not so much in terms of how they coach, it's what they think coaching is. And coaching, as we all know, a lot of you here are professional coaches. Many of you clearly have what I call a coaching mindset. Coaching is about asking. It's about giving more power to the question than to the answer. And a lot of managers end up telling people what to do. And I think that's where the disconnect is.
Yeah, that difference between asking and telling is so important. And in fact, I was really happy when I was reading the book, Ruchira, that on page 15, you use the eye-opener definition of coaching.
I was like, oh, I hope you're not going to quiz me what comes on what page, but yes.
No. I just have it here in front of me because I was talking about it earlier on with Tom, who's also here on the call, where one of the definitions the definition you put there is coaching is a process whereby a coach or leader aims to maximize the performance and potential of others through non-directive and self-enabling conversations.
Absolutely. And Oriana, I did research this to death. And when I started writing the book, there were 351,000 definitions of leader as coach and coaching. Now I'm sure it's up to 800 something thousand. But this was one that stayed with me, grabbed me, because I think it sums it up very succinctly. It's about maximizing the current performance and ensuring that the future potential is taken to the next level. So you let the individual soar higher, become a better version of himself or herself. And the key to doing that is through a series of non-directive, self-enabling conversations or interactions, right? And I think that is the most amazing definition. I've used that very liberally throughout the book. You must have seen it sprinkled in various parts of the book.
Ruchira, did you, we talked earlier about the number of countries that we worked in. Did you find and we've worked in China doing coaching. Did you find that the non-directive approach didn't work in some cultures?
Yeah, I mean, and absolutely. So you have to sort of go back to the cultural piece a little bit. I've often asked, do you feel that there is less coaching or more coaching depending on where you come from? I think it's the idea of what you think coaching is all about. When you're in the eastern part of the world, or what we call the collective cultures, right? China, to some extent India and Japan, you almost don the role of this guru or sampai, where you want to lift others. So you tell them what to do, because that's how you support and help those that work with you, that work for you. Whereas the Western world has truly sort of taken the definition of coaching the way we know it today: help people find your own path, individualistic cultures, right? It's all about the individual. It's about finding your own solutions. So you help them help themselves, as opposed to giving them the solution on a platter. And that's where it differs. So I guess the long-winded answer to your question is, a good manager or a good leader needs to truly be cognizant of the cultural nuances as he or she starts to coach in these cultures. Trying to uh, trying to ask these powerful questions without truly embracing the current context is hard work and will not go down very well with the people, and vice versa. So this, you have to be cognizant of your organizational and your national context before you embrace coaching.
And what do you say, Ruchira, to those managers who go, I don't have time for that? It's just so much easier to tell people what to do.
Honestly, I don't try that hard, because unless they truly buy into coaching, you can take a horse to the well. You can't make them drink it. So back to your question, when you ask managers why they don't coach, there's a variety of reasons. I don't have the time. I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the mind space. But if you really dig deeper, and all of these are true, right? We're busy people. We're fighting fires. We have to travel the world. Before COVID was upon us, we were jet setting all across the globe. Uh, and these might be reasons, but you have to be cognizant that uh, today, being a leader and a coach are they're not two separate disciplines. Building, enabling those that work with you, for you, is your responsibility and yours alone. Those that you appraise, those whose compensation you influence, they need to know what you feel about them, and that doesn't happen at the end of the year at the appraisal. And that needs to be corroborated in different ways. If it's an organization culture that doesn't fuel it, that doesn't encourage it, no amount of Ruchira or Oriana or with trying to do that is not going to work, right? It has to come from within. You need to truly appreciate what coaching is and what it does for your team members, and how it also helps you become a more strategic leader. And I think that's, as you rightly said, often lost, but you have to dig deeper. It's not the lack of time. It's also that often these very fearless managers who have all the answers find coaching a deeply disturbing or uncomfortable experience.
You want
Because
to do something or something? Do you need me to cover?
Because do remember that we had taught to have all the answers. And
Okay,
coaching
I'll try and come downstairs. Okay.
is often
Okay.
I'd love to join you, but I think we're in very different continents. So, I think what happens with coaching is it's so amorphous and fluid for a lot of them. They don't know where it begins and where it ends. They don't know if they've made a difference. They don't know if it's measurable or tangible, and that goes against the very grain of a good manager, right? So they also feel they're overstepping boundaries. So I think in many ways it's a very uncomfortable experience. Coaching is a lot of courage, and that doesn't come naturally, right? So it's layered. It's a full chapter that took me 700 words for me to decode and put it here. But coaching is hard work. And if a manager tells you upfront he or she doesn't have the time, believe me, that's not it. There's a lot more to it.
So let's open this up to the audience. And if you've just joined us, we asked at the start who was in the room, and the majority of Oh, wonderful. We're getting some background noise. If I could just ask people to mute themselves, that would be great. So we asked at the start of this conversation, what topic would you like to start off with and who's in the room? And most people in this room are coaches who coach others. And starting with this topic of, is it enough just to do coaching training, or what else is needed to create a coaching culture? So let's open this up to the audience. In your chat box, audience, tell us, what do you feel are the most important conditions to create a coaching culture for your team, your organization, or the clients you are working with? So let's just have 60 minutes of interlude music whilst we see what emerges in the chat box.
60 seconds, maybe.
Yeah,
60 seconds. What did I say?
60 minutes, yes.
60 minutes, yes. Let's have a long
That'd be
pause.
fun.
Thanks, Fiona, for getting it running. So what are the conditions you think are needed to create a coaching culture for your team, organization?
Jill's comment there about commitment from the senior team really talks to what you were just saying, Ruchira, that if people say I'm too busy, I can't do it, then the chances of it happening are really very low, aren't they? No matter how much effort goes into it.
Absolutely. And organizations often do these coaching training programs across the board, across levels, thinking that this would be like the magic wand, which would suddenly make everybody a fabulous leader coach. But we all know that it's not just about the training. It's not just about a training program predetermined to give you frameworks and models in coaching. You have to first buy into the rationale. You have to truly believe that your coaching will make a difference, and that coaching will make you a better leader. Unless you buy into that, unless you build a powerful business case for why the leader should be a coach, believe me, no amount of training will help.
Yeah, Lucy Robinson is saying authenticity. How would you describe how would you describe that authenticity that you need to see in somebody who wants to be a leader who coaches?
I think somebody here said it right at the start. You need a pre-existing culture of trust. And if it isn't a pre-existing culture of trust, you need to build that trust. So this whole premise of coaching is about also being vulnerable, right? You can be yourself when you're with that leader coach. You have to trust the individual to do the right things for you, to help you go higher, to make you shine brighter. And unless we build these reservoirs of trust as leaders, our coaching is not going to be impactful or effective. So I think trust is one of the biggest sort of rudders as you sort of steer this ship. The second piece, I think, again, somebody said, is being authentic. I've talked a lot about leaders that want to coach, but they don't know where to begin. And often it has to come from this realization from within that to be that leader coach, you have to be authentic. You have to be accessible, and you have to be consistent, right? You can't expect to help somebody become a better version of himself or herself when you're not in control of your own emotions. When you're a different person today and then you morph into somebody completely different the next day, right? So it's a lot of these things that you need to imbibe and embrace. But the first step is the willingness to coach and be coached. Create an ecosystem where seeking feedback is welcome, is the norm, right? That's number one. And the second bit, and I think a lot of you said it, is building those reservoirs of trust, forming those connections with your people. You can't expect them to be vulnerable in front of you if they don't trust to do the right things.
Right, and Tom's got a good point, Tom Batty, which is about bringing in the financial benefits. So bringing in the business case for studying, for coaching.
Absolutely.
Have you got any insights on that, Ruchira?
So there's, there's a lot and more. I mean, there's a lot of research which says coaching, gives you more engaged employees. It helps with productivity, etc. But it's only in the recent past that while you can't have a direct correlation, enough and more organizations are going back to the drawing board and saying, you know what, organizations that have successful leadership pipelines, that invest in building and coaching, are those that have revenues and profits that are 2.2 times higher than those that don't. BCG calls it the talent magnets. And organizations that do virtually no investment in people are called talent laggards. And so there's many more sort of studies, but this to me was perhaps one that truly showcases coaching equal to better business results, right? It was always about the numbers. And then in the last decade or so, there has been growing acknowledgement that a leader has to do a lot more than just the financials. But what experts are telling you is that grow your people, the numbers will follow. And so there's the whole tone and tenor is changing. Yes, you need those numbers, and the numbers have to be followed. And you have to sort of focus on building those numbers, relentless focus on that. But start with the people, grow those people, hone their unique strengths, and the numbers will follow. So the likes of BCG, the Great Places to Work, the Forbes survey, and now also putting in this as a big parameter of measurement. The best CEOs are those that build those numbers and also build the people that have spent a substantial amount of their organizational budgets in talent-related activities, talent-building activities.
Thanks, Rafira. I'm aware of the time. We've done one topic in 17 minutes. So it'd be great to do a couple more topics, but also let's also open the conversation for any questions the audience may have that don't fit into any of the topics. There may be somebody wondering, I'm a coach, and how do you write a book about coaching? So
while everybody's thinking, there is something, Ruchira, that I wanted to pick up on what you said just now, which is about the curse of knowledge, I think is how you put it in the book. Can you tell us more about the curse of knowledge for leaders?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You picked it up from the chapter that says good managers, bad coaches. And as I said, I have a full chapter on why, despite knowing that coaching is perhaps the most important factor in employee engagement, most managers make rather poor coaches, right? The curse of knowledge is one of the many reasons. It's often what happens is when you are the superstar performer, someone who knows it inside out, you are successful at what you do. Sometimes it's hard for you to translate that and actually coach and build others. So Professor Adam Grant talks about, he talks about Einstein, and he said Einstein was truly brilliant. But not long after he finished his landmark study on relativity, he used to teach at the University of Bern. And apparently when he was teaching this class, barely anybody signed up for it. 3 people did, and they were all his friends. And the next semester, only 1 person signed up. And he goes on to describe that brilliant as he was absolutely scattered. He knew so much about the topic. He was such an expert. The ability to really take that and take people along in the journey was something he was truly lacking. And that's true of a lot of superlative performers, right? They find it very hard to understand what I also call the capability gap from where you are or where somebody is. So I've also talked about another sort of reason. I call it the capability gap. Just like there's a curse of knowledge where you know too much, there is also the other phenomena where Sachin Tendulkar, right? For a lot of people who just looking at the general composition would know that he's one of the best cricketers. But he's also a fantastic individual performer. And while he might have been a stellar batsman, the few years that he was a captain of the team were the darkest times in his career because he was a miserable captain. His challenge was different. He clearly knew a lot, but he was also so gifted that he could do everything intuitively. And he found it very hard to take people along with him. So if I was at point A and he needed to bring me to point Z, he couldn't see why it was taking the individual so long to get there, right? And these are real challenges for us. So sometimes the best players in your teams don't morph into the best captains of the ship. And and by that definition, not great coaches either. They just don't know how to do it. They've never been taught how to do it.
Yeah, there may of course be people as well who want the spotlight, and they go, well, why would I want to grow the people around me? And I have met some leaders like that who I've been assigned to coach, and they don't actually see the importance of growing others. Do you see that as being core, Ruchira?
I see it all the time. In fact, it really surprised me because as part of these interviews, this was one of the questions I asked. And I had a lot of people telling me up front, they were interestingly from a certain industry. And they said, why would I do this? And that surprised me because they said, what's changed in the world is we have flatter structures now, right? We no longer have to earn our stripes to get somewhere. Age is no barrier to somebody being your boss or your manager. A lot of the people are just, I guess, for the lack of a better word, plain insecure. If I grow this individual, he or she is going to shine brighter than me. And it's not palatable for a lot of people. It takes a lot of intrinsic motivation and understanding to completely internalize that when you shine the light on somebody, you shine brighter. When you coach somebody and you elevate somebody, you elevate yourself. It's not something that's it's lost on a lot of people. And so you have to go back to the drawing board and explain to them. Was I successful? Probably not, but yeah.
There's a song that that talks about that you may know, The Killers. And there's a line in it which goes, I don't shine if you don't shine. And that's become one of my coaching songs, just because it sums it up very nicely.
Indeed.
Well, let's move into, we've got a question from Paul, which I think relates to topic 4, which is why coaching now. So thanks, Paul, for posting the question. And let's move into that 4th topic, which is why coaching now, which is the current context of coaching, hybrid working. We're also getting to see, I know, iOpener and other for yourself around coaching for female leaders as well. So there's it's just becoming a lot more topical and relevant. But Paul's question here, and also from Heather's, actually I'm going to ask Heather to expand on this for a moment, which is Ubuntu. Tell me more about this, Heather.
Oh goodness, you put me on the spot now, Vic. Ubuntu is a Zulu. It's a Zulu word. It essentially says that I cannot be fully myself unless I allow you to be fully yourself. It's something along those lines.
Right.
Yeah, beautiful. Interbeing, this interconnectedness between growth and potential of humans.
Paul, we will come to your question in a moment, but I love those moments of discovery when learning to be a coach that really do hold you when coaching others. Recently, I've been on an accredited coaching program with Tom and Oriana, and something very similar to Ubuntu. There was Tom, excuse me if I've got this wrong, but it was something, you are how you coach. Are you nodding? Tom's nodding, which means I got it pretty accurate. So that's good news. And it's one of those statements that has really helped me when that I remember what's me when coaching others. Hey, later on, we will find out from the coaches in the room. We'll find out from the coaches in the room what their best tips are on coaching others. That feels like a good question to ask the audience. But let's go back to why coaching now and topic 2 and Paul's question around how we're moving into communication, connector role and remits. What do you think, Oriana? Oh, Ruchira.
No, please go ahead, Oriana, please. I'm listening, I'm all ears.
Well, it does seem to be becoming more and more the flavor of the day to be talking about coaching as we're moving through the pandemic at different rates in different countries, and that may also have an impact on it. So perhaps we could start from there. What do you think the impact has been of COVID on coaching in organizations?
I think coaching has always been important, and I'm talking to a group of people that believe in coaching, or they wouldn't be here today. Right? So coaching has always been important, but it's never been more critical than it is today. are very choppy waters. These turbulent times need leaders at the helm with a steady hand. Right? And as I mentioned earlier, you need to think of trust as a big pillar. You need to build these reservoirs of trust and not constantly keep checking on your people. There's a survey again that says 40% of the employees feel that their managers don't trust them because they're constantly checking on them about finishing work from home. So what you need to do is move that check on to check in on those people. Empathy has been very underrated. We've never had conversations around grief, around burnout at work. It doesn't come naturally to leaders. That becomes a very important facet of what coaching is today in this post-pandemic world. Some of us are still living it, especially where I am. We're limping back to some semblance of normalcy, but we're a long way from calling ourselves normal. I mean, I had my first visitors last week, and I'm going for a cup of coffee next week. So it's time for celebration. It's been 3 months, right? So empathy, reservoirs of trust, and I think the other big thing is resilience. Right? You have to be that coach, that leader, that prevents your people from dipping into that valley of despair. You have to bounce back. You have to give them the assurance that you have their back. And the most underrated piece is listening. We don't listen. And the screens and the Zoom calls or Microsoft Office makes it that much harder. You have to, when you have those meetings, you have to pick up the cues, the spoken words and the unspoken words. You have to find those moments to have those bite-sized conversations with your people. You have to be that role model, as one of you said. You have to be the role model that sends out a clear signal that there's work and there's life. So you need to define those clear boundaries. And this is going to be a reality, right? We will live in a hybrid world where we will come to work a few days a week, depending on the organizational landscape. If this is what the world will look like, we, the leaders, have to embrace that reality and ensure we continue to be those coaches, those enablers that lift people up. I think to me, the biggest learning was the organizations that have thrived, not just survived in this pandemic, are those that have leaders that have given a voice to their people, that have truly embraced coaching in the sense that the leader has been willing to accept, I don't have all the answers, right? It's a pandemic of mammoth proportions. There's been no past precedent. There are no best practices to guide you. So leaders that have done it right have recognized that you have to give your people a voice. You have to give them a platform to share ideas and suggestions. And when you do that, you realize the best ideas can come from anywhere. Those that have pivoted business models overnight, that have changed everything, are those that have been fantastic coaches. And I don't mean by coaching just a 30-minute conversation through the Zoom screen. I'm talking about leaders who have given more exposure to the people, given them the platform to speak, that have just taken people along in this crazy journey.
When you talk about resilience and leaders being resilient,
yeah,
where does vulnerability come into that? The combination of resilience and the fact that many leaders are also feeling quite vulnerable at the same time.
I think to me, perhaps a leader who is also a coach and should be one, especially in these trying times, is the one that admits that he doesn't know it all. You have to find that balance between giving people the confidence that things will eventually be okay and that we're doing everything we can to support you and be with you, guide you through this journey. But you also have to be candid enough to admit that you don't know it all, and that you seek their support and the fact that you will do whatever you need to do to get them to the right destination. So it's hard work. You have to project confidence because they look at you for cues. If you project anxiety or helplessness, it's going to affect the morale of your people. But at the same time, you have to give them optimism, but as many experts are calling it, bounded optimism, right? Where you have to be realistic about the future, yet you have to give them hope that we'll come out of it together.
I'm very interested in what Amy Edmondson said about this, which is that right now leaders need to be giving confidence and optimism, exactly what you're saying, and that it's a 3-step process to be able to talk about what we know, what we don't know, and how we're going to bridge the gap between what we know and what we don't know.
I think it's very eloquently said.
Joanne also mentioned that in her chat around one of the conditions for creating a coaching culture is psychological safety, building on that work from Edmondson. There's a couple of questions emerging from Niall and Juliet around the qualities of a coach. So if you can see this, what point do coaches feel themselves moving from being coaches to being pastors? I don't know, this is a relevant thing, Niall, for yourself. You're a priest from Hackney, embarking on doing more with coaching as well. So apologies for not getting the criteria right in the opening poll. But there's some, Juliet, you've also mentioned this as well. When does it, I guess the question here around when does it become difficult to keep the non-directive hat on as a coach? Maybe this is something we could open to the wider audience as well. What are your initial thoughts with? Actually, I will open it up to the wider audience first. There are at least 15 people in the audience who are coaches or coaching others. There's at least 20 people in the audience. Tell me when it becomes difficult to be non-directive. And whilst that's happening, Oriana, do you want to share your own experiences?
I want to pick up on Niall and what he's saying about the pastoral role. And my belief around this is that for people to be outstanding, extraordinary coaches, they have to feel a sense of vocation for what they do. So it's slightly different it's a different wording than what you're saying, Niall, but that feeling of purpose and serving others and wanting to do that and feeling compelled to do that through the tool of coaching, through the way that we coach, the way that we relate to people, that would be my answer to you, where truly extraordinary coaches feel a sense of vocation for what they do.
May I say something?
Yes, absolutely.
By pastor, I didn't want to, I may have given the impression I'm talking about pastor in a formal sense, like some people might call me a pastor. I'm thinking more about being pastoral. So when you're coaching someone, I'm beginning to understand that it's a holistic process, and you're going to start encountering stuff that's underneath, and that you might be quite complex, quite deep, quite ancient with someone, and suddenly you're thinking, hey, I'm this person's manager, and they're telling me about, how hideous their partner's being to them at home, and you have a concern for that. But there's the whole thing around boundaries and where does that belong in an organization? That kind of more direct pastoral care. Is that for HR to worry about, or I'm not quite sure. And I'd just be very interested to hear some of your reflections on that, and indeed other people's.
Chira, what would you say about the presence of emotions and uncomfortable emotions at work?
I probably have a slightly militant view on this. I think as a leader, it is your role and your responsibility, as I've said before, to make the person a better version of himself and herself. But honestly, your guidance, if I can call it, your coaching, your collaboration should be restricted to the professional domain. When you feel that the individual needs help, which perhaps is outside the sphere of your competence or expertise, I wouldn't relegate it to HR at all. That'd probably be my last port of call. But I would try and perhaps counsel, if that's the right word, and urge the individual to seek help, specialist help. If there's childhood trauma, if there's a divorce in the offing, we lead complicated lives. We don't have perfect lives. When that starts spilling over to the workplace, you can't be in a position where you have to coach the individual through that. You have a lot on as a leader. You have to separate. A coach cannot be a crutch. So you need to take that call in terms of who the right person is to assist the individual in question. But that's not, whether it's pastoral or otherwise, not the job description of a leader and a coach.
Right. So I love what you just said. The coach cannot be a crutch. That's catchy. That's sticky. And definitely one to remember. Thanks, Ruchira.
And it's hard work because often we get emotionally entangled with the people that we work with, and as we should, because we care for them. And sometimes it's hard to separate this emotion from being that leader in the professional sphere. So I'm not saying for a moment that you can't help what you feel, but you have to be firm about how you can or cannot assist the individual going forward.
Mm-hmm. And if we go back to what Vic was saying, Vic, you were making a point about the difference between directive and non-directive. Can you tell us how that fits here?
Yeah, I was curious to see going right back to the beginning about the definition of coaching that we're connected with around a non-directive approach. Is what are the pitfalls you find as a coach in holding that non-directive space? And what's really interesting in the chat box is actually some really strong words like Tom. You know, we talk about pastoral or a vocation. Tom's language here that I think we have a duty to drop non-directive mindset when somebody's heading towards a crisis. But this also goes into other realms of coaching. There's some sticky moments coming out in this conversation, if that's the right word to do it. Not being a crutch, the Ubuntu moment from Heather. So I'm really valuing these insights from the audience. Okay, and I've gone quiet because I'm reading Heather's comment. I can't do two things at once, so there you go. There you go. So okay, let's hear from. We've done 2 and a bit topics in the from our agenda. I'm going to open this up to the audience. Let's go freestyle and take the structure away. And I'm going to ask what questions, reflections you may have had on the conversation so far, questions you may want to ask Ruchira about the book, or Oriana around her experience of coaching managers and leaders. And whilst you may be thinking of those questions, I'm just going to share a couple of things. This is the plug something from iOpener moment. So I'm going to share 2 or 3 things if you're interested in doing more with your coaching. So there's 3 things I'd like to share to take your coaching further. So the first thing is we are doing iOpener. I do have some pictures here to share with you. To share my screen. Hopefully you can see my screen. Can you see my screen, Oriana?
Yep.
Right. So there's 3 things I'd like to say more about what could be next for your coaching. There's Ruchira, your book was #1 in France. I think it's selling high in the charts now. It's top 10 in most continents, I believe.
Actually, INSEAD has made it a recommended reading for their leadership courses. I suspect that's caused a non-French book to actually be on top of the charts for so long.
Great. So it's booming across the charts across the world, which is great. And the second thing I'd like to share is Stephen Burt, who's also a friend of iOpener's, is doing a taster session of coaching as a leader, which is a program we've delivered across a number of the world's best business schools and in organizations. And there's a no-charge taster session, and also the iOpener coaching program, which I feel I can talk about loads because I've just graduated from the first cohort, and I recognize 4 faces at least in the audience today who've attended this program. It's an apprenticeship coaching program, lasts 10 weeks, and it's starting off in October and to December, but we also have a taster session. Hey, I'm not going to talk about these 3 things anymore. But Oriana will be sending each of you an email in the next 24 hours for you to get more information if that's of any interest. So look out for that email from Oriana. So hey, let's go into the chat box. I don't think we've got any further questions, but what's your reflection to Heather's comment, Oriana? And
I'm just reading Heather's comment. Sharing insights is not the same as directive. The picking up, yes, okay, so the idea of performance coaching is so different from transformational coaching. So you can coach for performance, you can coach for change, or you can coach for transformation. And there's the coaching for change would be when you're called into an organization and someone says, I need someone to become better at communicating so that they can get promoted. And so once they've ticked the box, then the coaching is over. And maybe they'll go back to where they were before. And the only part of coaching that I find truly, truly inspirational is the coaching for transformation. So that the coaching really is doing something long term. And I think you're saying the same as the difference between developmental and transformational coaching. And so that's the joy of being an independent coach. Because as an independent coach, you get the freedom to concentrate more on transformation. Whereas when you're a manager or a leader as coach, your scope is somewhat more limited. And as you say there, there's a distinction between it. And for leaders as coaches to know where that difference lies. Has that come up for you, Ruchira, in the research?
Yeah, I think you said it rather eloquently. You have to sort of think about, it's not a great example, but you have to think about the leader as coach is, you bring in a professional coach, or someone who irons really stubborn wrinkles sometimes, or you bring in a professional coach at different junctures in the life cycle of an organization, when there's time for development, transformation, switching roles, etc. But the role of that leader as coach is a continuum, right? Think about you are the individual who's ensuring that the person always has to wear a starched shirt every day. Whereas you come in, help iron out the wrinkle, go back in and come back in again. So our interventions as executive coaches, as leadership coaches are very short, sharp, and focused. We come in at specific junctures. And it's part of the larger organizational or business context, developmental, transformational, transitional, right, for the lack of a better word. And we do have a lot more liberty really to explore this. Whereas, as I think Oriana said, the manager or the leader as a coach has a fairly straightforward ask. Make sure that the individual is more capable than he or she was yesterday. It's all about performance. Make sure that you give them the confidence to move forward day after day. Give them more consciousness and self-awareness. Help them identify areas where they need to focus on. Right? So confidence, consciousness, clarity. A lot of the leaders I met and interviewed said this was perhaps the biggest contribution of coaching, external or internal, is getting the clarity. In fact, my book cover is all about that. I'm going to show it to you because Vic somehow just chopped off the top of the book. Because that's where the cover lies. So you completely, it's this, it took me a very long time, and Penguin was very patient. I gave them a high maintenance, but this took it to the next level. Because this is, for a lot of you, I'm sure you do this and you subscribe to this. It's a knot that is getting entangled, right? And they would stop short of that. But I had to try and explain to them, a therapist can do that, right? What does a coach do? Untangles, but also takes you to a higher plane. You soar higher and you shine brighter. And that's the message that we wanted to give. So that's what a leader does. He makes you more capable. He or she gives you more clarity and more consciousness and gives you the confidence to go forward. We do that as well as coaches. But our remit is typically very focused on certain asks. And we have the liberty and the ability to do more than just that.
I love the explanation of the cover of the book. I hadn't looked at, can you hold it up again? Just so
Oh,
that
it took
everybody
many cover designs, and I had a very disgruntled, I'm sure they didn't say that to me, graphic design team, because it just wouldn't get it. Or the arrow would keep moving in different directions. And I had to explain to them, it's about going higher. So anyway, and then they had to find a way of making it shine brighter. They couldn't get it. But I think in the end, it all worked out. So
in what you were just saying, it sounds like you were defining what great leadership is for you. How would you say it in a couple of sentences?
You know, as I was starting to write the book, one of my profs at the University of Chicago, right? He sent me this. He said, Mahatma Gandhi once very famously said, great leadership is not about the number of followers you have. It's about the number of leaders you create. And if you look around you, a lot of amazing, uncommon leaders have said the same in different ways, right? To me, that's what really uncommon or extraordinary leadership is all about. It's about building your empires, but also building people along. It's about the journey. It's about elevating, engaging, and empowering the people that work with you, that work for you. It's about shining the light on them, and it's about ensuring that when you shine the light on them, you shine brighter. When you elevate them, you go higher. That's what great coaching is. That's what great leadership is.
Maria likes that comment, Rashira. You've got some instant namaste from Maria. I call that the namaste sign, so I'm taking that as a hello. She likes it.
Is it?
Okay. Let's do a couple of things. One is a rather random one, but I feel I can ask for this because there's been some sticky moments, like the Ubuntu moment, the leader not as a crutch. I shared one earlier around a question that I learned from Tom about you coach as you are, and so I'm curious from the people who are coaching out there, whether you are a professional coach or you're coaching, you're a manager turning into a coach, or you're a priest. The question is, as a coach, what learning has served you that's stuck with you? It could be a comment, a sentence, a line, a technique. Tell me what has really stuck with you and you hold dearly as you've been coaching, either as a leader or as a professional coach. Just, I'm curious.
Well, Tom's given us the who you are is how you coach, which definitely.
Nice. I'm going to steal it.
He should trademark that, I think. He should really.
I'll steal it. I have a webinar tomorrow with the University of Chicago.
Great.
Leadership. So I'll steal it for that.
Great. So please just share any sticky moments on chat, because I think they.
Can I come in on that, Vic? Just to introduce myself, I was on the course that, along with Vic, the first time I've ever been on a coaching course. I've been a business owner for 30 years, so I've kind of in some sort of way coached people, employees and staff members over that 30 years. And the difference I think I've noticed in the very short time I've been doing any sort of third-party coaching is my ability to be a bit more direct and honest in holding the mirror up to the coachee.
Yep.
Whenever I've done that as an employee, that's been very dangerous and has caused quite a lot of concern about, I don't know, prying into their private life or something like that. Whereas when I've done it recently with a third party, it was taken in good stead, and I was trying, and she understood that I was trying to understand the barriers that she was facing to get something to happen. The difference was the relationship difference. As a boss, I don't necessarily think I can actually probe as deep as or hold the mirror up so harshly as I did as a third party consultant, coach. So I'd really, that's the big difference I've noticed. It's a very different space to be in.
Thanks, Colin. And I think a really interesting transition that you've made in the last few months to take your coaching further. There are some real pearls coming through, Rashira, or should I say, using Sachin Tendulkar, some real one-day centuries emerging in on the chats. There's some really cool stuff coming through. So beautiful comments indeed, Oriana. Great. So keep them flowing. I'm aware we've got 120 seconds to formally finish, but I'm more than happy to hang around for 8 minutes for an after party, if that's the word, for us to turn the recording off and open the conversation up. So but I'm just enjoying some of these insightful, sticky learning moments from people who've been coaching. Anything you're seeing, Oriana, that grabs you?
Just wise words. The no hiding place questions. That's definitely one of the coaching skills. And when I have had good coaches, they make me profoundly uncomfortable. And I'm always kind of rocking about on my chair and going, God, I really don't want to answer that. So yes. And Anne-Marie, there's no pride for having done it on your own. Being the stupidest person in the room, asking the questions, being curious. There's so much richness here in what you're saying. So thank you, everybody. And if you do want to stick around for a few minutes, please do. But we just want to say thank you to you all for being here today, for coming and listening to Ruchira. Ruchira, would you like people to connect with you on LinkedIn if they want to carry on the conversation afterwards?
Please, absolutely. The conversation doesn't need to end here. Please feel free to write. You can find me. I have a website, I have LinkedIn, I have lots of things, as I should, as my publisher insists. I'm everywhere, so find me. And I'll be more than happy to connect with you. And, you know, I picked up, it's been such a huge learning session for me. I've been in conversation with 2 great friends, but also 2 very uncommon and exceptional coaches. And I've learned a lot from Oriana, and maybe a little bit from Vic as well along the journey. so I'm delighted to be here today with these 2 wonderful people and also all the nuggets of wisdom that have come through the chat. I haven't been able to read it all, but thank you. I mean, I love that comment on connector managers. In fact, I've talked about it in my book. And also the last comment about coaches like us, leadership coaches, and now that you made the transition, you're absolutely right. And that's the reason I never coach my spouse, because we all have biases. We cannot truly be unbiased. There's always baggage. Just a little one for you to remember. There is something to be said about external coaches that have very little background. Their only intention is to support you in your role. You know, as bosses, as managers, whether we like it or not, those biases can creep in at different junctures. So I loved all those comments, and thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. And I'll be stopping the recording now, taking us off Spotlight so we can see everybody.